Echoes call from hollow halls, a voice that creeps and softly crawls. Time stands still, the air is.
Some final moments are never meant to be seen, yet they were captured on camera, frozen in time, revealing the last seconds of lives that ended in shocking, tragic, and terrifying ways. From getting beheaded in broad daylight to getting shot in a barbershop, these recordings show how quickly ordinary moments can turn into someone's final heartbeat. These are not fictional scenes or scripted dramas. They are real, raw, and unforgettable final seconds caught on camera, reminding us how fragile life truly is. On August 6, 2022, an 18-year-old named Ghulam Sadiq lost his life in a tragic and deeply unsettling public attack in Leightenstone. What makes this case especially haunting is not only the final moments caught through investigation footage and witness accounts, but the long chain of decisions that led up to that day, revealing how premeditation, access to dangerous items, and youthful recklessness can collide with devastating consequences. Ghulam was widely described as kind-hearted, friendly, and full of potential. Family members, friends, and teachers remembered him as polite, respectful, and full of warmth. He was someone who stood out in his community for his good manners, cheerful personality, and the sense that he had a bright future ahead. His loss left a deep emotional wound for those who loved him, particularly his mother, who later spoke about the pain of knowing her son would never return home. The individual responsible, Ahmad Mia, was a teenager at the time of the incident. Court findings later revealed that his actions were not impulsive or accidental. Instead, evidence showed a troubling pattern of preparation in the days and weeks leading up to the event. On July 23, 2022, he attempted to purchase a large knife online using a false identity and a fake driving license. That order was rejected when the seller detected inconsistencies. The following day, he made another attempt, ordering a fantasy-style weapon set from a different website, again using false details. This time, the order was accepted and shipped, although records later suggested those particular items may not have been collected. Investigators found that the weapon used in the attack closely matched what he had previously attempted to obtain. This raised serious concerns in court about how easily dangerous items can be accessed online, especially by young people willing to bypass safeguards. On August 4, 2022, Mia traveled from Birmingham to London. 2 days later, on the morning of August 6th, he took a train to Stratford, rented a bicycle, and rode toward Leightenstone. Despite the warm weather, he wore gloves, kept his hood up, and concealed part of his face, drawing attention from multiple witnesses who later recalled his unusual appearance and behavior. He waited near the street where Ghulam lived. When Ghulam arrived on his bicycle, the situation escalated. Mia pursued him through the area. Later, Ghulam attempted to seek help at a nearby restaurant on the high road, but he collapsed shortly after. Emergency responders arrived, but he sadly passed away at the scene. The time was recorded shortly after 2:15 in the afternoon. A post-mortem examination conducted on August 9, 2022, confirmed that the cause of death was a deep injury consistent with a bladed weapon. Authorities launched an immediate investigation, tracing Mia's movements through surveillance footage, bike rental records, and financial transactions. His bank card linked him directly to the bicycle used that day, and his clothing matched what witnesses and cameras had captured. On August 9, 2022, police located and arrested him on suspicion of murder. During questioning, he chose not to respond to investigators. In court, he later admitted to manslaughter, but denied murder, arguing diminished responsibility. However, prosecutors presented evidence showing deliberate planning, repeated attempts to acquire weapons, and a clear pattern of intent. The court ultimately found him guilty of murder, sentencing him to a minimum of 19 years, alongside additional time for possession of a bladed item. Investigators described the case as one where the full motive may never be fully understood, yet the planning behind it was undeniable. Officials also raised broader concerns about the growing trend of dangerous weapons being sold online or through social media platforms, where teenagers can sometimes access items that have no constructive purpose. Beyond the legal outcome, this case serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly lives can change and how critical it is to address online safety, youth violence, and responsible regulation. Ghulam Sadiq is remembered not for the tragedy of his final moments, but for the kindness, humor, and promise that defined his life. His story continues to spark conversations about prevention, accountability, and how communities can better protect young people from paths that lead to irreversible harm. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. Nightmare Feelings crossed over 187,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 250,000 before April 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community. Let's grow this together. Now back to the video. Inside a barbershop in Pittsburgh's South Side, what began as an ordinary day ended in a moment that would later become part of a tragic investigation and a deeply unsettling record of someone's final moments. Surveillance footage from inside Bonez barbershop captured the quiet build-up to a fatal encounter, offering investigators and the public a rare and sobering glimpse into how quickly tension can escalate into irreversible loss. The video shows Myra Carter seated in a barber's chair, draped in a cutting cape, appearing like any other customer waiting for a routine trim. Nearby stands Rayon Williams, dressed in a gold tracksuit. From the footage alone, there is no audio to reveal what was said between them, no raised voices, and no clear warning signs for those watching afterward. On the surface, the scene looks calm, ordinary, and unremarkable, which is part of what makes the outcome so disturbing. According to investigators, the interaction between the two carried underlying tension. Carter later told police that Williams had threatened to strike her during their exchange. What happens next unfolds quickly on camera. Carter steps forward, her posture shifting in a way that suggests a sudden decision or emotional response. In the following moment, she reaches beneath the barber's cape and retrieves a concealed firearm. In a matter of seconds, the situation turns from a private disagreement into a public emergency. Carter fired the weapon 3 times, according to authorities, and Williams was struck. The shock inside the barbershop is immediate. Customers and employees scatter toward the back of the store, reacting in fear and confusion. Williams did not survive the encounter, and Carter was later charged with criminal homicide in connection with his death. As investigators reviewed the footage and statements, the case raised difficult questions about fear, reaction, accountability, and the consequences of carrying weapons into everyday public spaces. What makes this incident especially haunting in the context of last moments ever recorded is the contrast between how ordinary the scene appears at first and how swiftly it transforms. Williams' final moments were not spent in a dramatic or high-speed situation, but in a familiar community setting, a place associated with conversation, routine, and comfort. The normalcy of the environment makes the sudden shift toward tragedy even more jarring. From an analytical standpoint, this case highlights how quickly interpersonal conflict can spiral when heightened emotions intersect with access to a deadly weapon. It also underscores the psychological intensity of confrontations where perceived threats, fear, or anger can override calmer judgment in an instant. There is also a broader social dimension to consider. Incidents like this often reignite discussions around personal safety, conflict resolution, and the responsibility tied to firearm ownership. Supporters of stricter measures argue that everyday spaces should not become arenas for life-ending encounters, while others point to the importance of education, mental health awareness, and nonviolent communication as preventive tools. Beyond legal debates and public commentary, the human cost remains central. For Williams' loved ones, the footage represents the final moments of someone they cared about. For those who witnessed the event firsthand, the memory may linger as a traumatic reminder of how quickly safety can be shattered. For Carter, the incident marks a turning point that carries serious legal and moral consequences. In the larger context of horrifying last moments ever recorded, this case stands out because of its realism. There are no supernatural elements or dramatic chase scenes, just 2 people, a tense interaction, and a split-second decision that permanently altered multiple lives. It reminds viewers that some of the most unsettling endings do not happen in extraordinary places, but in everyday settings where tragedy arrives without warning. The released footage captures some of the most tense and emotionally charged last moments ever recorded, documenting the final hours of Corin Gains during a prolonged standoff with law enforcement in August 2016. What makes this case especially haunting is that many of the moments leading up to the fatal encounter were recorded in real time, offering a rare but deeply unsettling window into fear, conviction, and escalating conflict. It all started when she refused to comply with the police after traffic violations.
Delegation, let me look for it for you real quick.
Okay. It would not be that size.
How big would it be?
It will be something that you would
How
have
about
to
my
carry.
Maryland Police Training Commission certificate?
After 6 months, the police went to serve arrest warrants on her in the suburb of Randallstown. Gaines was wanted for failing to appear in court for traffic stop charges dating to March. In the video, Gaines is seen inside her apartment with her 5-year-old son. At different points, she records herself while holding a firearm, speaking directly to the camera and expressing a strong belief that authorities were trying to violate her rights. Her tone shifts between defiant, fearful, and determined. She insists that she is not a criminal and claims she is acting in self-defense, framing the situation as an attempt to protect her home and her peace. Meanwhile, outside the apartment, officers were attempting to serve a misdemeanor warrant. Negotiators repeatedly tried to de-escalate the situation, urging communication and offering to talk things through peacefully.
You and I are going to talk until we come to an agreement. We bring everybody out safe, and you and I go have a sit down. Because you know, and I know that this ain't right.
The standoff lasts roughly 6 hours, stretching the emotional strain on everyone involved. Inside the apartment, Gaines continues to record herself, voicing frustration and mistrust.
They've been quiet a while, so they plotting to come in here and disturb the peace here. They've already disturbed the peace.
To viewers watching later, her recordings feel like a mixture of self-documentation, protest, and emotional release, as though she is trying to preserve her side of the story in case the situation ends badly. The fatal moment occurs when gunfire is exchanged between Gaines and officers. She is killed during the encounter, and her young son is injured. Investigators later determined that the officer involved acted within legal justification based on the perceived threat at the scene. However, the outcome sparked widespread debate, emotional reactions, and legal action from Gaines's family, who challenged the official ruling and argued that the use of force was excessive. What makes these final moments particularly chilling is the presence of self-recorded footage. Unlike many tragic incidents that rely only on witness accounts or official reports, this case includes direct recordings from the person at the center of the crisis. It transforms the event from a distant news story into a deeply personal and emotional timeline, showing thoughts, fears, and intentions in her own words. Beyond the legal arguments, the footage forces viewers to confront larger questions about mental health, communication breakdowns, and how quickly tense situations can spiral beyond control. Could earlier intervention have changed the outcome? Could trust have been built before emotions reached a breaking point? Could different approaches to negotiation or crisis management have prevented a fatal end? There is also a broader social conversation tied to this case, including concerns about police interactions, civilian rights, and how misinformation or extreme fear can shape dangerous decisions. At the heart of it all is a family that lost a mother, a child who witnessed a traumatic event, and a community divided by differing interpretations of what happened. The final moments recorded in this case are not frightening because of spectacle, but because of their realism. They show how ordinary environments, when filled with fear and mistrust, can become the setting for irreversible tragedy. These recordings remain a sobering reminder that some of the most disturbing final moments are those where people believe they are standing their ground, even as the situation closes in around them. On October 21, 2021, security cameras inside a luxury high-rise in downtown San Diego captured a moment that looked completely ordinary at first. A 29-year-old TikTok creator, Ali Abulaban, rides an elevator up toward his wife's apartment. He stands there calmly, the kind of posture you would expect from any resident heading home. And that is what makes the footage so unsettling, because the normal appearance is the disguise. 2 minutes later, another camera outside the apartment records a scene that investigators would later describe as the start of a fast-moving tragedy. This horrifying incident began on September 8, 2021. Dispatchers in San Diego received a call from the Spire Luxury Apartments. Anna Abulaban asked for police help, describing an argument and saying she felt unsafe and that Ali hit her. Police responded that day.
Yes, I'm here. I think he left the house.
He just left?
Yeah.
Is it just you?
It's just me. My daughter's here. She's
They also documented Anna's injuries from being pushed during an argument that began over a suitcase, and explained options like requesting a protective order.
Knees right here, fixing the suitcase, removing stuff.
Yeah.
And then he puts you over there. And then can you show me where like your body part contacted that?
It's like right here, like my head.
Anna did not pursue it. That detail matters, because many people imagine danger only counts when someone makes the most dramatic legal move. In reality, fear often looks like hesitation, especially when there is a child involved. Immigration worries, financial pressure, and the hope that the person you married will finally calm down. Online, their life still looked glossy. Ali's character, Jin Kid, was gaining massive attention with dramatic skits and impressions, and Anna appeared beside him at times like a co-star in the brand of their family. But behind the scenes, reports of arguments and escalating behavior kept coming. Multiple calls were made between July and October 2021. Neighbors and people close to them were alarmed, not because they could predict a specific outcome, but because they could hear the pattern: jealousy, humiliation, apologies, another blow-up, another apology. Then the cycle repeats, often louder each time. After the marriage fractured, Anna began seeing a longtime friend, Rayburn Barron. Ali did not accept the separation. Instead, he hovered, messaged, pleaded, and then shifted back to anger. The most disturbing part is the way he tried to turn technology into a leash. He set up a secret way to monitor audio inside the apartment using an app connected to their child's device, transforming something meant for games into a tool for surveillance. That is not just jealousy, it is possession dressed up as concern. On the afternoon of October 21st, 2021, he listened in, heard voices, and decided he had to confirm what he believed. Cameras show him entering the building, moving through the garage, returning, adjusting his clothing, and riding the elevator as if he is on autopilot. This is one of the most frightening truths about certain crimes. They do not always look frantic on the outside. Sometimes they look calm, because the person has already chosen what they intend to do. After the killings, he tried to control the narrative again. He left the building, called emergency services, pretending he had just discovered what happened, then went to pick up his daughter from school. Police moved quickly, secured surveillance footage, identified him and his vehicle, and issued an alert that he could be armed. Officers located him during a traffic stop and arrested him without turning it into a public spectacle, prioritizing the child's safety. In court, prosecutors argued this was not a sudden, unplanned eruption. They pointed to the surveillance, the monitoring, the preparation, and the staged emergency call as pieces of a deliberate chain. Years later, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. At sentencing on June 28, he received life without the possibility of parole, plus additional time, meaning he will spend the rest of his life in prison. If there is a lesson hidden inside these recorded last moments, it is that the most dangerous warning sign is not always a single argument. It is the pattern of control, the public shaming, the spying, the way someone starts treating another person's freedom like a threat. And, in this case, the cameras did not just record the end. They recorded the slow build that many people around them had been afraid was coming. On January 4, 2022, at around 11:15 in the evening, a doorbell camera recorded 17-year-old Zion Foster walking into her cousin's home in East Point, Michigan. She believed she was spending time with family she trusted. Less than 2 hours later, she would vanish forever, and those camera frames would become some of the last peaceful moments ever captured of her alive. Zion was a high school senior with plans, energy, and ambition. She balanced her job at the Detroit Wing Company with classes at East Detroit High School, talked excitedly about graduation, prom, and eventually getting her own apartment. Her mother, Sierra Milton, described her as independent, strong-willed, and protective of her younger siblings. Like many teenagers, Zion had struggled with rules and family pressure, especially during a period when her grandmother was battling cancer, but she always kept her mother informed about where she was going and who she would be with. That night, she told her mother she was going to spend time with her cousin Jalen Brazier, someone she had known her entire life and trusted deeply. Jalen was 23 years old, a father of two, and outwardly appeared to be a responsible family man. He lived with his girlfriend Katrina Smith, who was working a midnight shift at the time Zion arrived. The house was otherwise quiet, except for two young children asleep upstairs. What Sierra did not know was that behind closed doors, Jalen had been manipulating Zion for years. Thousands of text messages later recovered revealed a troubling pattern of influence, emotional pressure, and boundary crossing. He encouraged secrecy, offered to hide her if she ever ran away, and gradually built an unhealthy attachment disguised as guidance and care. Over time, those messages shifted from friendly to inappropriate, revealing an obsession that prosecutors later described as calculated and deeply disturbing. Shortly after midnight, Zion sent what would become her final message to her boyfriend, saying she was on her way home. She never arrived. Her phone stopped connecting to the network at 1 in the morning and never came back online. The next day, when Sierra realized her daughter had not returned, she contacted Jalen for answers. He claimed he had not seen Zion in years, a statement that immediately raised red flags because Sierra had personally seen him pick up her daughter multiple times.
He hadn't seen or been in contact with her for 3 years, which is impossible when you were in my driveway and gave me a hug.
Meanwhile, Zion's boyfriend, Vertez Gonzalez, shared location data showing her phone had been near Jalen's home that night. Jalen attempted to dismiss the evidence, even sending selective video clips from his own camera system in an effort to cast doubt. When investigators finally reviewed footage from a neighboring camera across the street, the truth began to surface. The video showed a white sedan pulling into Jalen's driveway shortly after 11:15 that night. 2 people exited and entered the house. Only one person was later seen leaving. Around 1 in the morning, the same camera captured Jalen's vehicle, moving in a way that investigators found suspicious, backing into the driveway with the trunk facing the yard, then driving off before returning a short time later. K9 units later alerted officers to evidence that Zion had been inside the trunk. Weeks later, Jalen walked into a police station with legal counsel and admitted Zion had been at his house. He claimed she passed away suddenly and insisted he panicked rather than calling emergency services. Instead of seeking help, he chose to move her body and dispose of evidence.
So I freaked out. I'm like, okay, well, this looks terrible. This looks very bad. I didn't know what to do. So I took her, I put her into my trunk, and I put her in my trunk. Okay. In my car. And I took her to Highland Park and put her inside of a trash can.
Digital evidence became a major turning point. Despite attempting to erase data from his phone, cloud backups revealed internet searches made after Zion disappeared. These searches focused on topics related to hiding evidence, avoiding law enforcement tracking, and how garbage processing works, details that suggested planning rather than panic. Forensic analysts also uncovered earlier searches and messages that reinforced the pattern of fixation and inappropriate behavior toward Zion. Zion's family and volunteers launched an intense search effort, even organizing a large-scale landfill search in Highland Park after investigators traced where trash from that area had been processed. For weeks, volunteers sorted through mountains of waste, hoping to bring her home. Despite their dedication, her remains were never recovered. On June 13, 2023, authorities arrested Jalen Brazier on charges including second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. During trial proceedings in May 2024, prosecutors presented thousands of messages, location records, and expert testimony showing a pattern of manipulation, dishonesty, and intent. After a short deliberation, the jury found him guilty. He was later sentenced to decades in prison, ensuring he will spend the majority of his life behind bars. Zion Foster's last recorded moments show her walking into a home she believed was safe, trusting someone she loved as family. The camera never recorded her walking back out. What remains today is her story, the determination of her mother, and a community that refused to let her disappearance be forgotten. Her dreams of graduation, independence, and a bright future were cut short, but her name continues to stand as a reminder of why truth, vigilance, and justice matter. It was September 6, 2019, in Anchorage, Alaska, when security cameras captured what looked like a normal couple stopping at a local shop. 48-year-old Brian Smith steps out with his date, 52-year-old Valerie Castler. Nothing about the footage screams danger. No chaos, no alarms, no obvious signs that something is wrong. But the unsettling truth is that Valerie is sitting beside a man investigators would later identify as a serial killer, and according to the case, the remains of a recent victim were in the back of his truck from the day before. When Brian goes inside the store to buy drinks, Valerie stays in the truck. It is raining, it is late, and she is passing the time the way anyone might. Distracted, tired, maybe just trying to stay warm. Then a small mistake happens. The kind of mistake that usually leads to nothing more than annoyance. She drops her phone and reaches down to grab it, but she picks up Brian's phone instead. That one moment becomes the turning point, not just for her, but for an entire investigation. Because when Valerie later realizes the phone is not hers, curiosity kicks in. People say curiosity can be risky, but in this case, it may have saved lives. She starts scrolling, trying to figure out whose device she is holding, and she notices a folder with a title that does not belong on any normal person's phone. It looks like a label someone would use to hide something in plain sight. And when she opens it, she finds video files that appear to show violent attacks on women, recorded up close, recorded like trophies. Even without sound, the implication is horrifying. With sound, it becomes worse, because the voice in the recordings appears to match the man she was just with. Imagine what that does to a person's nervous system. One moment, you are thinking about getting back to your tent and staying dry. The next moment, you realize the person who offered you a ride might be the reason other people never made it home. Valerie does not run to a police station right away. And that detail matters because it shows how fear actually works in real life. She hides, staying out of sight for days, terrified that Brian will realize what happened and come looking. This is what danger does. It makes even the most basic choice, like asking for help, feel like stepping into open air with nowhere to hide. Eventually, she gathers the courage to turn the phone and its SD card over to police. When detectives view the files, the case changes instantly. This is no longer rumor, no longer suspicion, no longer a missing persons puzzle with nothing solid to touch. This is direct evidence. The kind investigators rarely get handed in such a clear form. The videos give them something even more specific. A voice, details that point to a vehicle, and clues tied to a location. Soon, remains found near mile 108 on the Seward Highway are confirmed through DNA to be 30-year-old Kathleen Jo Henry. Investigators then stack the evidence like bricks in a wall. Phone location data places Brian's device near the area where the remains were found. Timestamps line up with the recordings. There are links to a hotel room. The pieces do not just suggest involvement, they reinforce each other, forming a timeline that is hard to explain away. Brian is arrested when he returns to Alaska, taken into an interview room, and at first he tries to act calm, cooperative, and confused. He mentions a previous incident where his truck was broken into and a camera was stolen, as if he is guiding detectives toward a harmless explanation. But detectives keep the pressure steady. They do not need to shout. They have the card, the recordings, and the digital trail. When they describe a chilling line spoken in one of the videos, his composure starts to crack. What follows is a familiar pattern in cases like this. Deny, minimize, suggest someone planted the evidence, claim memory problems.
I just cannot understand why I would do something like this. And that's what your question is. Why would I do that?
I mean, we know you did it. You know you did it. We're just looking for, and there may not be a why that you think is reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Then, when the facts keep closing in, adjust the story again. At one point, he even tries to separate himself from what happened by blaming an alter ego, as if a new name could erase a real timeline. But the strongest part of this case is not a dramatic confession. It is the ordinary, modern trail people leave behind. A phone that reports where it has been, a hotel record, a camera that stores what it sees, a search history that reveals what someone worried about after the fact. Even his own statements about cleaning the truck sound less like innocence and more like someone trying to erase a mess. In the end, this story is terrifying because it shows how close danger can sit to normal life, how a casual ride and a quiet stop at a shop can hide something monstrous underneath. It also shows how one accidental phone swap, one human mistake, can expose a darkness that would have stayed buried much longer if technology, timing, and courage had not collided in the same night. In the early hours of September 10th, 2025, a motel in Dallas became the scene of a tragedy so sudden and shocking that it left an entire family and a community struggling to make sense of what happened. Surveillance video later showed the suspect being booked into the Dallas County Jail. But the most haunting part of this story is what took place before any handcuffs, in a place that was supposed to feel familiar and routine. Chandra Muli Nagamalia, known to many as Bob, was 50 years old and a steady, hardworking motel manager who focused on providing stability for his family. He lived on site with his wife and teenage son, which meant the motel was not just a job, it was their home base, their daily rhythm, their sense of security. Guests and co-workers saw him as someone who kept things running, handled problems, and treated people with basic dignity. To his wife and son, he was the center of their everyday life. Working alongside him was Jordanis Cobos Martinez, a 37-year-old coworker whose past included violence and a short temper. In many workplaces, people do not know the full history of the person standing next to them. They just know who shows up for shifts, who does certain tasks, who seems quiet, who seems intense. And that is part of what makes this case so unsettling. The danger was not a stranger in the dark. It was someone inside the routine. That morning began with something painfully ordinary. A washing machine in the laundry area was broken. Chandra told Cobos Martinez not to use it until it could be repaired. The message was passed through another coworker, likely because of a language barrier. In a normal world, that would have been the end of it. A brief annoyance, a small delay, then everyone moves on. But the details that followed show how quickly an everyday disagreement can turn into disaster when pride and anger take over. The instruction was reportedly taken as a personal insult, not as a practical request. It became, in that moment, about control and humiliation rather than maintenance. Cobos Martinez walked away upset, but instead of cooling off, he returned carrying a machete. From there, everything shifted from routine to panic. Chandra saw the weapon and ran, and his cries drew his wife and son outside. Think about that image for a second. Not as a headline, but as a family's real life. A wife hearing her husband calling out. A son hearing his father in fear. Both of them sprinting toward the sound because love makes you move before logic catches up. They tried to intervene. They pleaded. They attempted to get between the attacker and the man they loved. But the confrontation escalated instantly, and Chandra was beheaded in front of them. He died there at the motel, in a moment that no family should ever be forced to witness. And the trauma of watching that kind of violence does not end when the scene goes quiet. It replays. It echoes. It changes how a person feels in every place that used to feel normal. Police arrived quickly and found the suspect still at the property. He was arrested and charged with capital murder. From a legal perspective, the steps that follow will involve court proceedings, evidence review, and formal accountability. But from a human perspective, the family's life was already split into two parts: everything before that morning and everything after. In the days that followed, the community response mattered. People gathered, offered support, and raised funds to help the family, especially the teenage son whose future was now shaped by loss and trauma. Compassion can help a family survive the practical aftermath, but it cannot erase what they saw or bring back the person they lost. This case also sparked bigger questions that people always ask after an extreme act of workplace violence. How does someone with a violent history remain in situations where others may be vulnerable? Were there warning signs coworker noticed but did not know how to report? Could better screening, better intervention, or better workplace safety practices have prevented it? Those debates can be important, but they often feel distant to the people living with the grief. For them, the reality is simpler and heavier. A husband is gone. A father is gone. A home no longer feels like home. What makes these last moments so horrifying is not just that they were recorded, but that the recording captures a truth many people try not to think about. Sometimes the most dangerous moment in your life does not arrive with a dramatic warning. Sometimes it begins with a broken washing machine and an unchecked temper, and ends with a family left holding memories they never asked to carry. In April 1988, a camera is rolling at the Franklin County Sports Parachute Center in North Carolina, in the United States, and what it captures feels almost impossible to believe, because everything starts out looking routine. Ivan Lester McGuire, 35 years old, is not a beginner. He is an experienced skydiver with more than 800 successful jumps. On this day, it is his third jump, and he is not jumping for thrills alone. He is working. His job is to film a student and an instructor during their exit and descent, footage that can later be used for training. Today, that kind of video would be simple. A tiny camera, a light harness, a quick upload. But in 1988, filming in free fall required bulky gear. McGuire carries a heavy backpack, not a parachute container, but a pack loaded with recording equipment. It sits on his back, with the kind of weight and presence his body is already used to feeling before a jump, which is where the danger begins, because the human brain loves shortcuts. When something feels familiar, we stop double-checking it. The plane climbs to over 10,000 feet. Inside, there is the usual focus and the usual rhythm. Then, it is time. McGuire goes first, dropping away from the door so he can turn and capture the other two as they exit. In the footage, you see the student and the instructor leave the aircraft. You see them settle into position, and then their parachute deploys. They drift upward in frame as McGuire continues falling beneath them, still filming, still doing the job, and then the moment arrives when he should pull his own cord. It is an action his body has done hundreds of times. Reach, grab, pull, then the sudden tug of fabric and the calming shift into controlled descent. But this time, his hand finds nothing. There is no handle, no cord, no backup. The camera keeps recording as the realization hits him all at once, not as a slow understanding, but like a trapdoor opening in the mind. He reacts the way many people do when a terrible mistake becomes undeniable. First, disbelief, then frantic searching, as if the missing piece might appear if he just checks again. Then the horrible drop in the stomach when you remember, clearly now, that you never clipped it on, never felt it, never verified it. People know that feeling in small ways, like forgetting a phone or keys. The sudden thought, wait, where is it? Only this is the most extreme version of that sensation, because there is no reset button in the air. McGuire is heard blurting out a desperate, panicked exclamation as he understands what has happened, and there is nothing anyone can do to reach him in time. Afterward, investigators recover what they can from the damaged recording equipment to answer the question everyone asks first. How does a skydiver with that much experience leave a plane without a parachute? They determine he did not lose it during the jump. He never had one. It appears unintentional, an accident built out of confusion and routine. Attention quickly turns to the process, not just the person. An inspector notes that regulations require a pilot check parachutes before anyone jumps. At first glance, that sounds like a clear failure. But the situation is more complicated. McGuire did have a pack. It just was not the right pack. The camera backpack was similar in mass and appearance to a parachute container, enough to fool people at a glance, possibly including McGuire himself. This is where the story becomes more than a single tragic event. It becomes a warning about repetition. Third jump of the day. Familiar plane, familiar climb, familiar weight on the back, familiar mission. When routines repeat, attention can dull. The mind starts assuming, I already did the checks, because I always do the checks. In safety-critical work, that assumption is the quiet enemy. Ultimately, the incident is ruled an accident, with no foul play suspected. But the footage and the aftermath leave a lasting lesson. Real safety is not built on confidence or experience. It is built on verification, on checklists, on teammates who confirm what you confirmed, and on systems that make it hard for a single lapse to become final. Because sometimes the most horrifying last moments are not caused by monsters, but by a simple, unthinkable human mistake that nobody caught until it was too late. On May 22, 2013, Lee Rigby, a 25-year-old British soldier, was walking near Woolwich Barracks in southeast London, wearing a hoodie that supported a charity for wounded veterans. He had served his country, taken part in overseas deployments, and recently moved into a recruiting role, where his outgoing and friendly personality made him well-liked. To his family, he was more than a soldier. He was a son, a partner, a father, and someone whose warmth and humor made people feel at ease. After returning from dangerous service abroad, his loved ones believed he was finally safe at home. That sense of safety would soon be shattered. That afternoon, at roughly 20 minutes past 2, a vehicle suddenly swerved toward him and struck him from behind. What followed was not an accident, but a deliberate and pre-planned act. Two men exited the vehicle and carried out a violent attack in full public view, turning a quiet street into a scene of shock and disbelief. Bystanders nearby were forced to confront a moment that no one expects to witness in everyday life. Some froze in fear. Others instinctively reached for their phones, documenting events that would soon be broadcast across the world. Yet among the crowd were individuals who chose courage over retreat. One woman, Ingrid Lyle Kennett, stepped forward with the intention of helping Lee, believing at first that he had been involved in a traffic incident. When she realized the situation was far more serious, she did not run. Instead, she tried to speak calmly to the attackers, attempting to de-escalate the situation and prevent further harm. The men stopped her, explaining that the only reason they have killed the man is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers.
The only reason we have killed this man today is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers. And this British soldier is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
They even waited for the authorities to arrive and even spoke to onlookers, attempting to justify their actions with extremist reasoning. Their statements were recorded and quickly spread, adding another disturbing layer to an already tragic event. Police were alerted within minutes. Armed officers arrived shortly after and confronted the suspects, who ran toward them. The situation was brought under control, and medical teams moved in as soon as it was safe. Tragically, Lee Rigby could not be saved. In the days that followed, the nation struggled to process what had happened. News outlets replayed the footage. Conversations erupted across the country about security, radicalization, mental health, and how such an attack could occur in broad daylight. While emotions ran high, community leaders from all backgrounds urged calm, condemning the violence and offering condolences to Lee's family. Muslim organizations across the United Kingdom were quick to reject any association between their faith and the attacker's actions, emphasizing that such violence went against their beliefs. The trial later revealed that the attack had been planned in advance, with evidence showing preparation and intent. One of the perpetrators admitted his role openly in court, driven by extremist ideology. The other was found to have a history of serious mental health challenges. Though the court determined he was still responsible for his actions, both were sentenced to life in prison. Yet beyond the legal outcome, the deeper impact of this tragedy lies in the final moments of Lee Rigby's life, and the people who stood by him. His last moments were marked not only by violence but also by the presence of strangers who refused to look away. Their bravery became a powerful counterpoint to the hatred that fueled the attack. Lee Rigby's memory continues to be honored across Britain. Memorials, tributes, and public remembrance ensure that he is remembered not for the way his life ended, but for the service, kindness, and humanity he showed while he was alive. And while the events of that afternoon remain one of the most horrifying moments ever recorded in modern British history, they also serve as a reminder that in the face of fear, ordinary people can still choose compassion, courage, and dignity. In the 1970s, a young woman sits on a bright, cheerful television set, separated from three men by a screen, listening to their answers and trying to choose the most fun date. The questions are silly, the audience laughs, and one contestant, Bachelor number 1, comes off smooth, confident, and camera-ready. He sounds like the kind of guy who knows exactly what to say. What no one in that studio realizes is that the man performing charm for national television is Rodney Alcala, later nicknamed the dating game killer. That contrast is what makes this story so disturbing. A dating show is built around trust. You are supposed to believe the worst possible outcome is an awkward dinner. But with Alcala, the nice smile was a costume. He used that same friendly mask outside the studio too, often approaching women with a camera and a compliment, offering to take their photo, making it feel harmless, even flattering. Photography was not just a hobby for him. It was a tool, a way to start conversations, lower defenses, and make people feel like they were safe with a talented, ordinary guy.
Would you girls mind if I take your picture?
By the time he appeared on national television in 1978, investigators believe he had already harmed multiple women. Earlier in 1968, he had attacked an 8-year-old girl in Hollywood after tricking her into trusting him. A witness noticed something was wrong and called police. Officers forced their way in and saved the child, but Alcala escaped out the back. Even then, people who knew him struggled to accept what he was capable of. Teachers and classmates described him as intelligent, polite, even impressive. That is a painful lesson repeated in many cases like this. A person can look normal, speak well, and still be dangerous. Alcala ran, used an alias, and blended into new places. In the early 1970s, he lived in New York, took classes, and even worked around children, which is hard to process considering he was on the run for harming a child. One of the most chilling parts is how systems that should protect people failed repeatedly. He was arrested, prosecuted, and still did not stay locked away. In 1974, he received a sentence that could have kept him inside for life. Yet after roughly 3 years, a professional evaluation described him as improved, and he was released. Listening to that now, it is maddening, because the pattern was not getting better, it was getting bolder. Once free, Alcala returned to what he did best. Hiding in plain sight, he drove around, approached women, and used that photographer routine again and again. After some of his crimes, police later found a massive collection of photographs in a storage locker, images of women and girls whose names were not always known. Those photos became a haunting puzzle, because each picture raised the same frightening question: was this person safe after the shutter clicked, or did something terrible happen next? Back on the dating game in 1978, The moment that still gives people chills is how easily he plays along. The show is lighthearted, but his jokes land differently once you know his history. Cheryl Bradshaw, the contestant, chose him as her winner on air.
So I'll take bachelor number 1.
Bachelor number 1.
Then she met him face to face and felt something was off. She trusted that instinct and refused to go on the date. That one decision mattered. It is a reminder that sometimes the body notices danger before the mind can explain it. In the months that followed, the violence continued. In June of 1979, 12-year-old Robin Samso was at Huntington Beach when Alcala approached her and her friend, asking to take their picture. Another adult nearby felt uneasy and tried to steer the girls away, but Robin later left on a bicycle and never made it to her class. Police eventually arrested Alcala on July 24, 1979, and investigators found jewelry and more photographs, including items linked to Robin. The legal process dragged on for years, with convictions overturned on technicalities, forcing families to relive the worst days of their lives again and again. Finally, in 2010, DNA technology connected Alcala to multiple murders from the 1970s, and a joint trial led to guilty verdicts. Even after that, investigators kept working through the photographs, trying to identify more victims and give families answers. The horror in these recorded last moments is not only the crimes themselves, it is the way a predator used charm as camouflage, and how easily he passed through workplaces, classrooms, and even a television studio, smiling under bright lights, while danger stood just off camera.